Hey, Heartwarming Millionaire fam. We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Please comment on where you're watching from so we can see that our heartwarming millionaire family is all around the world. New York City, the city that never sleeps, of lights reflecting off glass towers, of jazz notes drifting from basement clubs and the bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral echoing through Manhattan canyons. A place where everything seems to pulse with its own ambition, except for the silence suffocating the penthouse on the 58th floor of the residences at Central Park Tower. In that stillness, Olivia Bennet sat alone. A glass of white wine rested quietly in her hand, the soft glow of the modern chandelier gleaming against the cashmere of her sweater, as soft as skin, as fragile as the emotions slowly draining from her heart. 6 months ago, she had believed that marrying Alexander Hayes was a gift from fate. He, the man with eyes like winter steel, cold and captivating all at once, the Manhattan CEO admired across the American financial world. He had swept into her life like a corporate merger, contracts, lawyers, a wedding at the plaza attended by 400 people who didn't know she was marrying a stranger. But now, the penthouse once promised to be their sanctuary held only the hum of climate control and the faint sound of her breathing. Olivia tilted her glass slightly, listening to the wine brush against the crystal. A small sound, yet in this empty space, it rang like a melancholy note. Outside, the city still blazed with light, the Empire State Building glowing purple in the distance, Fifth Avenue glittering with endless possibility. New York was breathtakingly alive, yet she felt trapped inside it like a rare painting locked in a vault. Alexander. Her voice was as light as breath dissolving into the air. No answer, only the distant wail of sirens 58 floors below. He had promised her father she would never want for anything, and he had kept that promise in the cruelest way. She had everything money could buy, but nothing her heart needed. She rose and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The glass was cool beneath her fingertips as she pressed her forehead to it. Far off, the Statue of Liberty held her torch against the dark harbor, a symbol of freedom Olivia no longer felt. She remembered their wedding day, when he had recited his vows like reading a quarterly report, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond her shoulder. Back then, she had told herself it was pressure. Back then, she still believed business arrangements could transform into love if you gave them time. Now, 6 months later, she had a penthouse worth $20 million, a closet full of designer clothes she never wore, and a husband who treated her like a business associate he was contractually obligated to house. Olivia turned, the light casting shadows across her face. In the mirror, a 27-year-old woman stared back, green eyes that once sparkled with creativity, now dulled with quiet defeat. Her auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, bare shoulders carrying the faint scent of vanilla and jasmine, the fragrance her mother had said would make any man notice her. Olivia smiled bitterly. He didn't notice any scent. He didn't notice her at all. "We share a home, but we don't share a life," she whispered, as if afraid to hear her own truth. The words fell into the air, warm as a confession. Yes, she had tried to reach him. Even though every day he left before dawn and returned after midnight, even though every time he passed through the living room with his phone pressed to his ear, his suit immaculate, his eyes sliding over her as if she were part of the expensive furniture. In that moment, she realized she had become one of the assets he managed. Beautiful, well-maintained, but without a voice he cared to hear. She went to the small desk by the window, where a half-finished canvas still rested, an abstract painting of stormy skies over water. She touched the brush lightly, a sad smile flickering on her lips. Once she had dreamed of being an artist, of having her work shown in Soho galleries. Now she was just Mrs. Hayes, a title that felt like a beautiful prison. The soft click of the smart lock sounded in the foyer, the sign he had returned. Olivia's heart beat faster. 6 months, and still she reacted like the hopeful bride she had been, her stomach fluttering at the sound of his footsteps. Then she heard his voice, sharp and businesslike. "Marcus, I reviewed the acquisition proposal." "No, don't reduce the equity stake. We'll finalize terms in tomorrow's meeting." His voice, cold, authoritative, commanding. No hello, no acknowledgement of her presence. She quietly returned to the sofa and lifted her glass again. This time the wine tasted bitter, perhaps because it mixed with the thin thread of tears gathering at the corner of her eye. Alexander passed by, setting his leather briefcase on the console table, then paused. "You're still up." His tone had the politeness of a distant colleague. "I was waiting for you," she said softly. He nodded slightly, answering only, "I have some documents to review. Don't wait up." The study door closed, a small sound, but it felt like the final word of the evening. Olivia sat still. On the wall, the minimalist clock showed 10 p.m. Everything was perfect. The lighting, the temperature, the Italian marble floors, the museum-quality furniture, except for one thing. Her heart had been silent for too long. Outside, the city lights glittered like a galaxy of broken promises. In the darkness, she whispered like a vow carried by the wind. "If you refuse to see me, then I will make myself impossible to ignore." The words were not a threat, but an awakening. That night, in the city of dreams and ambition, something inside Olivia Bennet stirred awake, the part that had once believed she deserved to be loved, not just provided for. Manhattan gleamed under the afternoon sun, light bouncing off glass and steel. Inside the penthouse overlooking Central Park, the faint scent of lavender candles mingled with soft piano music drifting from hidden speakers. The sound Olivia played only to mask the emptiness in her chest. On the marble dining table lay an invitation printed on heavy cream cardstock. The Hayes Foundation. Annual Gala. An evening celebrating innovation and philanthropy. Olivia smiled faintly at the irony. Philanthropy, giving to others, the one thing missing from her marriage. In the master bedroom, Olivia Bennet stood before the full-length mirror. The woman in the reflection, 27, slender, with porcelain skin and eyes the color of spring leaves, was still beautiful. Yet something essential was missing. She wore a floor-length champagne gown, high neckline, long sleeves, nothing provocative. Elegant, refined, exactly what Alexander's publicist had suggested. The perfect CEO's wife aesthetic. Sophisticated but forgettable. She applied a touch of nude lipstick, swept her auburn hair into a flawless chignon, and looked again. Every detail was immaculate, yet there was no fire in her eyes. A woman of appearance without substance. Olivia tilted her head slightly, studying her reflection. The woman staring back was not the one who had once painted until 3 a.m. in her Brooklyn studio, who had laughed with friends over cheap wine and expensive dreams. That girl had believed in passion. Now she lived in muted tones. The door opened. Alexander appeared, dressed in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, black tie sharp against his crisp white shirt. The familiar scent of sandalwood and bergamot cologne followed him in. He paused for a moment, his gaze flickering over her before returning to his phone. "Ready?" he asked, his tone efficient, clipped, the same voice he used in board meetings. "Almost," Olivia replied quietly. He nodded. "Good. The media will be covering tonight. We need to project unity. You know what's expected. Elegant, understated, nothing that creates tabloid speculation." It sounded less like a conversation between spouses and more like a PR briefing. When he stepped back into the hallway to take a call, the room felt colder. Olivia stood motionless, eyes fixed on the empty doorway. Then slowly, she turned back to the mirror. The woman before her looked flawless and lifeless. A quiet voice whispered in her mind, "This is who he wants, but not who you are." She took a deep breath, fingers reaching for the zipper at her back. It was a small motion, yet it changed everything. Slowly, deliberately, she unzipped the champagne gown. The fabric slid from her shoulders, pooling soundlessly at her feet like shedding old skin. In the walk-in closet hung a dress she'd bought 3 months ago, during a rare solo afternoon in the meatpacking district. Deep midnight blue silk, almost black with a plunging neckline and an open back that dipped daringly low. The kind of dress that demanded attention, that celebrated the body wearing it. She had never worn it. Maybe because she was afraid of his disapproval, afraid to reveal the woman she once was, afraid that confidence might be mistaken for rebellion. She sat on the edge of the bed, the midnight silk cool in her hands, smooth as water against her palms. The last rays of afternoon sun streamed through the windows, painting a line of gold across her bare skin. And in that light, she finally saw herself again. The real woman. Not the accessory, not the perfect wife, but the one who had once turned heads without trying. A small smile curved her lips. You want safe and predictable, but I was once wildfire. She rose, letting every trace of doubt fall away. The midnight blue silk draped over her skin like liquid shadow, clinging to every curve. The open back revealed the elegant slope of her spine, the delicate bones catching the light. She left her hair down, letting the auburn waves fall in loose, natural curls over one shoulder. She replaced the nude lipstick with deep burgundy, rich, bold, dangerous. As the color touched her lips, Olivia felt as though she were reclaiming a part of herself she had buried alive. She chose her grandmother's diamond drop earrings, slipped into black stilettos, and stepped back. In the mirror, the woman looking back was utterly transformed, no longer Mrs. Hayes, just Olivia, radiant, powerful, unapologetically herself. Her gaze met her own in the glass, and for the first time in 6 months, she recognized the woman staring back. The door opened. Alexander walked in, probably to check the time, but the moment his eyes found her, everything stopped. The golden light caught the silk, the curve of her bare back, the burgundy of her lips, the color that made his breath catch without permission. He froze. His phone nearly slipped from his hand. Olivia lifted her eyes, voice soft, laced with quiet challenge. Is this too much for the gala? Her tone was gentle, but her eyes held fire. Alexander swallowed, his jaw tightened. That's not your usual style. Maybe, she smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Because tonight I'm not being who you want me to be. I'm being who I actually am. He said nothing. His eyes lingered on her throat, on the way the silk moved with each breath, on the elegant line of her back that he suddenly couldn't stop noticing. Silence pressed between them, thick and electric. The sound of their heartbeats seemed to fill the room, slow, uneven, then faster, the unspoken rhythm of something dangerous awakening. Alexander cleared his throat and turned away abruptly, as if afraid to lose the control he'd built his entire life around. We're going to be late, he said, voice lower, rougher than usual. Then let's not waste any more time, Olivia replied smoothly. She picked up her clutch and walked past him. The scent of jasmine and vanilla brushed the air between them. He didn't turn, but in the reflection of the window, his eyes followed her, no longer cold, no longer indifferent. Olivia stopped by the elevator, glancing at her reflection in the polished steel doors. The woman standing there was someone Manhattan wouldn't ignore. Someone Alexander could no longer pretend didn't exist. A quiet smile played at her lips as she whispered to herself, Tonight, if anyone needs to remember how to look, it's going to be you, Alexander Hayes. The elevator doors opened and the soft music swelled, deep, warm, like the heartbeat of a woman slowly coming back to life. Light from the crystal chandeliers scattered across the ballroom floor, dissolving the grand space into a haze of champagne tones and elegant laughter. The Metropolitan Club glowed tonight under a different kind of illumination. The orchestra played Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, graceful yet commanding, while a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos swayed beneath the gilded ceiling. Among the Manhattan elite, tech moguls, and Wall Street titans, Alexander Hayes entered with Olivia, and instantly every gaze shifted toward them, not because of his reputation, but because of the woman beside him. Olivia shone in a way that no chandelier could match. Her midnight blue silk dress moved like liquid shadow around her slender frame, revealing her back and shoulders with effortless grace. Every step she took seemed to change the temperature of the room. The burgundy of her lips glimmered like an invitation, sweet but edged with danger. No one saw her as Mrs. Hayes tonight. Tonight, she was Olivia Bennett, the woman New York itself would pause to admire. Alexander felt it, and he hated admitting that he wasn't the first man to notice. He saw the lingering glances as they crossed the room, the way photographers whispered her name, the subtle nods from younger executives as she passed. Something hot and sharp twisted inside his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. Jealousy. Alexander, the smooth voice of Richard Ashford, director of a major investment firm, cut through the buzz. The Meridian deal is brilliant. You're a visionary as always. Alexander smiled, shook his hand, and exchanged practiced pleasantries, but his eyes kept searching for her. He found her near the champagne bar, laughing softly with a group of young entrepreneurs, her head tilted slightly, light sliding over her bare shoulders. Then a man approached her. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept back, with the easy confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. Ethan Carter, CEO of Carter Innovations, a man known for his brilliance and for the string of hearts he'd left in his wake. "It's so. Mrs. Hayes wrote," he said, voice smooth as aged whiskey. "May I have this dance?" Olivia hesitated. Her eyes flicked across the room toward Alexander. He was still in conversation, or pretending to be. She smiled politely. "Of course." Setting her glass down, she placed her hand in Ethan's. His palm was warm, firm, but her pulse didn't stir. She was simply dancing, simply breathing again. The orchestra began a waltz. Ethan led her to the center of the floor. They moved gracefully, spinning under the chandeliers, her dress whispering against the polished marble. "It's surprising," Ethan murmured, "that a woman like you could stay hidden in Hayes's shadow for so long." Olivia smiled but didn't reply. "If I were your husband," he added, his voice dropping lower, "I'd never let you out of my sight." The words dripped like honey laced with poison. Alexander heard them. He couldn't not hear them. From across the hall, he watched Ethan's hand resting on her waist, her hair brushing his shoulder. A chill ran down Alexander's spine. The champagne in his hand tilted, bubbles breaking at the rim. For a brief moment, he saw himself, the man who used to make her smile like that before he'd buried himself in spreadsheets and stock portfolios. And then he realized the most unbearable thing in the world wasn't losing someone. It was watching the woman you'd taken for granted find life in someone else's arms. When the music ended, applause rippled across the hall. Olivia lifted her chin, smiling politely. Ethan bowed and brushed a kiss against her hand. "Thank you, Miss Bennett," he said, deliberately using her maiden name. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the applause, low and edged with steel. "Thank you, Carter, but my wife already has a dance partner." Alexander. The room stilled. His tone wasn't raised, but it sliced clean through the air. Ethan smiled faintly, taking a step back, his expression half challenge, half amusement. "Of course, Hayes, she's all yours." Alexander didn't answer. He simply extended his hand. Olivia looked at him, surprise, defiance, and something unspoken flickering in her green eyes. After a heartbeat, she placed her hand in his. The orchestra began again. A slower waltz, deeper, heavier. His hand settled on her back, his palm against her bare skin. Heat seeped through the thin silk. She lifted her face, catching the faint scent of his cologne, sandalwood and bergamot mixed with something darker, more primal. They moved together as if time had folded back to another life, to nights that existed only in memory now. Their bodies remembered what their hearts had forgotten how to say. Olivia tried to keep rhythm, but every step threw her balance. He was still as controlled as ever, yet within his grip she sensed tension, fear, the tremor of a man who'd built his life on logic and was losing it one heartbeat at a time. Alexander leaned closer, his voice a murmur against her ear. "Do you know the worst part about having you in my life?" She met his eyes. "What?" "That I forgot what it felt like to truly see you until I watched you in someone else's arms." Her breath caught. The music, the lights, the laughter, everything blurred into silence. Only their hearts remained, beating in the space between them. He tightened his hand at her waist, his thumb brushing the bare skin of her back. She didn't pull away. She just looked back, not with challenge, but with the ache of someone who had missed him too long to admit it. The waltz ended. Applause rose again, but Alexander didn't release her. He kept her close as if letting go would dissolve everything they'd just rediscovered. "Everyone's watching," she whispered. "I don't care." he said, voice rough. I've spent 6 months not watching you. Tonight, I need to remember what you feel like in my arms. She stilled. Possessive as it was, his words were the most honest thing he'd said in half a year. They stood there amid music and murmurs, surrounded by strangers. And yet, in that instant, New York contained only them. Finally, he released her, slowly, reluctantly. A faint, unguarded vulnerability flickered across his face, almost an apology. Olivia met his eyes. Her expression softened, but something still burned deep within. You remembered what it feels like, she murmured. But do you have the courage to keep it? Alexander didn't answer, but in his eyes the lights of Manhattan itself were reflected back, bright and burning. New York glittered in the dark, its lights stretching across the skyline like threads of gold on black velvet. The town car rolled quietly through the streets, leaving behind the glow and noise of the Metropolitan Club. Inside the car, neither spoke. Alexander sat angled toward the window, one hand on his knee, the tendons tightening with each controlled breath. Across from him, Olivia stared out at the city. Her auburn hair had come loose, curls falling against her bare shoulders, catching the passing streetlights. The air between them was thick, heavy, electric, the kind of silence that vibrates before it shatters. Both knew that a single word could ignite everything. When the car stopped in front of their building, Alexander stepped out first, opening the door for her. She didn't look at him as she passed, the sharp echo of her heels on the marble lobby floor cutting through the night. The elevator doors closed behind them with a soft click. The city outside faded into stillness. Only the hum of machinery and their breathing filled the elegant, suffocating space. Olivia reached up, unclasping her earrings, then the delicate necklace, one by one. Each piece fell onto the console table with a soft, metallic chime. Then she turned. Her voice was calm, too calm, every word sharp enough to slice through steel. You don't get to be jealous, not when you're the one who made me invisible. Alexander lifted his head. His eyes, steel gray with flecks of blue, were storm dark. I never made you invisible. Didn't you? She gave a small, bitter laugh. You forgot to touch me. You forgot to ask how my day was. You forgot that I wasn't furniture, that I was supposed to be your wife, not your responsibility. She took a step closer, her voice trembling but fierce. You remember every contract, every stock price, every board member's name except one thing, that you let our marriage die without even noticing. Alexander was silent for several seconds. Then his voice came, rough and low. I thought providing for you was enough. Olivia shook her head slowly. Her breath shivered, but her gaze stayed unflinching. No, Alexander, providing isn't loving. You possess things, you manage assets, but you never loved me. You held on, but you never touched. He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, measuring each inch of distance. She didn't move. She just looked at him, lips still burgundy, daring him to either walk away or finally feel. Alexander stopped just before her. Only inches separated them. The light above traced a golden line along her bare skin, fragile, luminous, trembling. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice husky, cracking under its own restraint. I want you to see me, she said softly, her tone breaking the air like glass. Not as something you already own, as the woman who once made you feel alive. His hands clenched. Anger, longing, fear, all collided within him. You think I don't see you? Every night you're right here, and I'm terrified that if I touch you, I'll destroy what little we have left. You already did, she whispered, eyes wet but steady. With your silence. That sentence landed like a final blade. No logic, no control could save what was breaking open between them. The air snapped humid, raw, trembling with heat. Alexander moved first. In 2 strides, he pulled her toward him. There was a soft sound, bodies colliding against the edge of the table, breath catching mid-motion. She tried to speak, but his mouth was already on hers. The kiss was wild, desperate. 6 months of coldness burned to ash in one sudden blaze. It wasn't tender. It wasn't gentle. It was instinct. Two souls colliding after half a year of pretending not to need each other. Olivia's hands pressed against his chest, but she didn't push him away. She could feel his heart pounding, frantic, trembling, as if he was afraid of losing her all over again. He broke the kiss just enough to gasp. "I forgot what this felt like for 6 damn months." "Don't promise me anything," she whispered, her tears slipping onto his lips. "Just don't disappear again," he answered with another kiss, deeper, rougher, part apology, part punishment. His hands found her back, sliding beneath the silk. She shivered, not from fear, but from recognition. She had thought she'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, but as his touch traced old pathways, the ache inside her cracked open, and the rain finally came after a long drought. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Summer rain began to fall, tapping against the windows, a rhythm to their breaths. Alexander pressed his forehead against hers, voice raw and broken. "I'm sorry, Liv." She closed her eyes, her fingers brushing the edge of his collar. "Don't say my name like regret," she breathed. "Say it like you used to." He answered her with another kiss, slower this time, but deeper, until words no longer mattered. Pain and desire melted into something achingly human, fragile, fierce, alive. Heartwarming Millionaire fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Heartwarming Millionaire, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. The rain struck harder, the sound echoing through the glass walls as they lost themselves in each other. Her midnight silk dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling silently on the marble floor. His hands roamed her skin, rediscovering every line, every curve, as if mapping the way home after being lost for too long. Olivia tilted her head back, her breath breaking into the sound of rain, unsteady, trembling, real. No more words, only the rhythm of two people learning how to love again, in darkness, in breath, in the remnants of what was once broken. As the storm outside subsided, the room fell into a warm, dim glow. Olivia lay still, her head resting on his shoulder. Raindrops glittered on the window like shards of crystal. Alexander stroked her hair gently, his hand still trembling. Neither spoke, but both understood. Tonight wasn't weakness, it was confession. They had found each other again in chaos, in tears, in the raw pulse of something real. Nothing was perfect, but at least, at last, they were true. Sunlight slipped through the sheer curtains, casting a soft gold glow across the bedroom. From somewhere far below, the sound of traffic hummed faintly, blending with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Olivia stirred, her lashes fluttering as she opened her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was until she felt the warmth beside her. Alexander was still there. He lay on his side, one arm draped over her waist, his breathing steady, his face calm in a way she hadn't seen in 6 months. The sunlight traced his jawline, sharp and familiar, and her heart trembled. For the first time in half a year, she didn't wake up to emptiness. She watched him quietly, the memories of last night still vivid. The anger, the tears, the kiss, the surrender of two hearts that had been holding back for far too long. A part of her feared that when he woke, he would be gone again, retreating behind the walls he'd built. But when Alexander opened his eyes, he looked at her first and smiled. Not the distant, polite smile she had come to know, but a real one, tired and warm. "Good morning, Liv," he murmured, his voice low and rough with sleep. Olivia blinked. "I thought you'd already be at the office." He reached for his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up with notifications. Board meeting, 8:80 a.m. Investor call in 15 minutes. He stared at them for a moment, then pressed the power button and placed the phone face down. "There's no meeting more important than this morning." Olivia looked at him, almost laughing. Alexander Hayes, the man who once made Wall Street revolve around his calendar, was lying beside her in bed with his phone off and his attention entirely on her. She smiled faintly. "Someone just broke his own rule." "Maybe," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "But some rules deserve to be broken, especially the ones that made me forget what really matters." Later, the kitchen was bathed in soft morning light. No housekeeper, no catered breakfast, just 2 coffee mugs, a few slices of toast, and the jar of homemade strawberry jam she'd made weeks ago, the one he had never touched. Alexander fumbled awkwardly with the toaster, and it beeped loudly in protest. Olivia chuckled. "You're really breaking every rule today." "I've never done this before," he admitted, slightly embarrassed. "I guess I forgot how to live normally." "That's okay," she smiled. "We can learn together." They ate slowly, unhurriedly. Every word, every shared glance was tentative, but sincere enough to fill the space with something fragile and alive. The kitchen felt warmer than the sunlight streaming through the windows. After breakfast, Alexander stood by the massive windows, gazing out at Central Park. The trees were beginning to show autumn colors, gold and crimson against the green. The city was quieter at this hour, so different from the world of deals and numbers he had built around himself. Olivia joined him, standing silently beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then his voice came, quiet and steady. "I forgot that love isn't about control. It's about listening." She turned to him, her hand brushing his. "I don't need you to be perfect, Alexander," she said softly. "I just need you to be present." He didn't reply, but his fingers tightened gently around hers, a gesture without pretense, only truth. The sunlight fell across her hair, making the auburn strands shimmer like copper threads. Alexander's voice broke the quiet again. "I don't know what happens next," he said. "But I want to try. Not because I'm afraid of losing you, because I want to see you, truly see you, every day." Olivia smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. "Boy, then start by learning how to make coffee without burning it." He laughed, the sound low and genuine, echoing softly through the bright kitchen. "So that's our deal? No contracts, no expectations, just 2 people learning how to be together again." She tilted her head, her eyes warm. An imperfect beginning, but a real one. That morning, for the first time in 6 months, the penthouse no longer felt like a showcase. It was alive with laughter, the clink of coffee mugs, and the quiet rhythm of breath shared between 2 people rediscovering how to live and how to love. Outside, the sounds of New York drifted up from below, the heartbeat of a city that never stops. Inside, 2 people who had been strangers in their own home finally found the courage to start again. Sometimes love doesn't need to burn bright. It only needs to stay warm long enough for 2 hearts to find their way home after the storm. The morning sun poured into Manhattan, bathing the city in soft amber light. In the kitchen filled with the scent of coffee, Olivia was slicing oranges into a glass pitcher of water. Alexander sat at the counter, his white shirt slightly wrinkled, his hair still mused from sleep. It looked like an ordinary scene, but for them, it was something they had never had before. They had just lived their first real night together in 6 months, not as strangers sharing a residence, but as partners beginning to understand each other. Alexander was saying something about the coffee when Olivia laughed, and the sound of it still hung in the air when a sharp knock at the door cut through the moment. He frowned. Olivia looked at him, a flicker of worry in her eyes. The door opened. Marcus Webb, the largest shareholder of Hayes Capital, a man with silver hair and eyes always calculating, stepped in without waiting for an invitation. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Alexander," he said quickly, his voice urgent. "The Singapore deal just collapsed. The regulatory board denied approval, and the Asian investors have pulled out. The board wants you immediately." The warmth in the room cooled at once. Alexander stood up. Olivia watched as the man before her shifted. The one she had held last night was gone, replaced by CEO Hayes, the man who could command billions with a few words. "How soon?" he asked. 30 minutes. We're convening an emergency meeting." Marcus's glance flicked toward Olivia, a faint trace of disapproval in his eyes, then back to Alexander. "We'll be waiting for you at headquarters. This can't be delayed." The door shut behind him. For a few seconds, only the sound of the clock and traffic far below remained. Alexander stood still. Olivia moved closer, touching his wrist lightly. "You should go." He looked at her, his gaze caught between duty and something he couldn't afford to lose. I don't want to leave you. You're not leaving me. You're stepping away for a moment. Her voice was soft but firm. Go, Alexander. But when it's over, come back. Don't let that world swallow you again. He held her hand, nodded. I promise. In Lower Manhattan, the Hayes Capital headquarters rose like steel against a gray sky. The boardroom on the 52nd floor was filled to capacity. Harsh fluorescent light fell on the faces of men in dark suits, their expressions drawn tight. On the giant screen, a cascade of red numbers glared back at them. Cost overruns at 40%. The press is tearing into the deal. The shareholders demand accountability, Marcus said, his voice cold as steel. Alexander stayed silent. He sat there listening to every accusation, every number falling like stones. But in his mind, there were no charts, only the image of Olivia's eyes lit by morning sun when she said, I just need you to be present. Another voice cut in. You've been distracted, Hayes, too focused on your image. But image can't save a failing empire. The words from one of the elder board members landed like a blade across the room. Alexander lifted his head. Failing. Yes, I've been failing. Not at building this company, at building a life worth living. The room went silent. Marcus's brow creased. What are you saying, Alexander? I'm saying that power is an addiction I've been feeding for years, and I've had everything except the one thing that makes me want to wake up in the morning. He stood, loosening his tie, unbuttoning his collar. If you want to replace me, replace me. But don't expect me to trade what's left of my humanity to save a stock price. Without another glance, he walked out, leaving stunned faces behind. The elevator doors closed, reflecting back a man who, for the first time, looked like himself. By late afternoon, New York was bathed in golden light. Soft rain tapped against the penthouse windows. Alexander stepped inside. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of a brush over canvas. He stopped at the doorway. Olivia was sitting by the window, a light cardigan draped around her shoulders, her hair loosely tied, a hint of bare skin catching the last light of the day. Before her lay an open canvas, an abstract painting of storm clouds breaking into sunlight, soft, free, alive. The golden hour light slanted across her face, dissolving everything else into a halo of color. The sight made him catch his breath. He had seen thousands of presentations, millions of data points, but none of them had ever been as beautiful as this, a woman alive in her quiet moment, painting her way back to herself. She heard his footsteps and turned. You came back. I promised, Alexander said, his voice low, tired but lighter. He came closer, standing behind her, glancing at the canvas. You're painting again? Yes, I need to remember who I used to be. Alexander bent slightly, his finger brushing the edge of the canvas. It's beautiful, free, no lines forced into place. I envy the way you see the world. She smiled faintly, tilting her head so the light touched her green eyes. And I just hope you don't let that world swallow you again. He looked at her, long, quietly. Then he said softly, Today I realize the empire I built is hollow. If I lost it all, I could start over. But if I lost you, I couldn't. Olivia didn't speak. She set her brush down, turned to face him. The space between them was now only a breath. Then don't let words be just words, Alexander, she whispered. He bent his head and pressed a kiss to her forehead. A kiss that didn't demand, but thanked and repented. Outside, the sunset painted the city in warm orange hues. Inside the quiet room, they sat together without speaking, without needing proof. Amid a world of chaos, they had found a single moment of real peace, and in that silence, Alexander understood. He had stepped out of his empty empire to return to where he was meant to be, beside her. The afternoon light of New York draped the room in a soft veil of gold. Sunlight spilled gently over the marble counter, glinting through the glass of orange juice in Olivia's hand. The penthouse was quiet, filled only with the hum of the city below and the faint scent of vanilla drifting from a candle. She sat curled up on the sofa, barefoot, her auburn hair loosely tied, a thin sweater draped over her shoulders, simple, effortless, and beautifully composed in that quiet way only she possessed. On the table lay her open laptop, the screen glowing with an email from Ethan Carter, the man who had danced with her at the gala and who now wanted her as part of his new venture. Olivia, I'd like to offer you the position of creative director for the Carter Gallery project in Los Angeles. Full studio team, expenses covered, everything will be taken care of. We can begin the moment you say yes. She read it twice, then leaned back in her seat. Los Angeles, the city she once dreamed of, where she could create freely again. No longer Mrs. Hayes, but Olivia Bennett, artist, visionary. A part of her longed to say yes, to see if the world still had a place for the woman she was before she became a name beside his. But her gaze drifted toward the corner of the room where a large canvas lay unfinished, the collaborative piece she and Alexander had begun together after their reconciliation, a project about light breaking through darkness. She had promised herself that if he truly changed, she wouldn't leave before she saw it through. The soft ring of her phone broke the stillness. Ethan Carter. Olivia drew a slow breath before answering. Hello, Ethan. Olivia. His voice was smooth, persuasive. I hope you've thought about it. Los Angeles needs you, and frankly, so do I. She smiled faintly, her voice calm, gentle, but steady. Los Angeles is beautiful, Ethan, but I think I already have a life here that needs finishing first. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then came his quiet chuckle. I understand. But if you ever change your mind... I won't, she interrupted softly, but with certainty. Because I've already chosen to stay, not for anyone else, but for myself. She ended the call and set the phone down, exhaling slowly. What she didn't know was that Alexander had heard everything from the hallway. He stood in the doorway, the light falling across his face, half shadow, half sun. After a long pause, he walked toward her. Olivia was still seated, idly turning her glass in her hands. When he came closer, she lifted her gaze to meet his. You turned down Los Angeles? He asked, his voice low, touched with both surprise and something softer, almost gratitude. I did, she said, her tone even. I think before I chase dreams somewhere else, I need to finish the one I started here. He didn't speak right away. Something flickered in his eyes. Not pride, not relief, but a mix of humility and gratitude, the kind that comes with recognition. Thank you, he said finally, for not walking away. She set her glass down, her eyes warm but unyielding. I'm only staying if you truly want me here, Alexander, not as decoration in a perfect life. His gaze broke, then found hers again, a storm and a calm at once. He stepped closer, resting his fingertips against the edge of the table. His voice was husky when he spoke. I want you here, Olivia, not to fill a void. I need you in my life, not my image. No roles, no expectations, just you. She didn't answer, but her lips curved, not in irony, but in forgiveness. He sat beside her. The sunlight caught in her hair, making the auburn strands shimmer like copper threads. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and vanilla, a quiet warmth. You know why I didn't leave? She said softly. He glanced at her. Why? Because for the first time in 6 months, you're real. Alexander exhaled, a sound that was half laugh, half sigh. The truth is, I was always afraid I wasn't enough for you. Control was all I knew. It's how I survived. But with you, I'm learning that love isn't control. It's the courage to be seen when you're not perfect. Olivia didn't reply. She reached out and placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. And that's all I ever wanted. She leaned forward, her forehead touching his. For a moment, New York outside went still. There was only their breath, slow, warm, steady. Their eyes met, tender, earnest, and glistening like light breaking through storm clouds. Alexander's hand rose to her cheek, his fingers tracing the softness of her skin. She didn't move away. I used to fear losing. You, he whispered. But now I fear something worse. making you disappear again because of me." She smiled gently, her voice both soft and strong. "I'm not the kind of woman who disappears anymore, Alexander. Not for you, not for anyone." Her words hit him like sunlight after rain. He smiled back quietly, sincerely. "I don't want you to disappear. I just want to be lucky enough to see you every day." She laughed under her breath, the fading light dancing in her eyes like honey. They sat there for a long while, not touching, not speaking, wrapped in that fragile space where silence no longer divided, but connected. Outside, New York pulsed with life, the hum of voices from the streets below, the distant wail of sirens, the rhythm of a city that never stops. Inside the penthouse, the world had shrunk to just the two of them, two souls who had once lost each other and now, finally, found their way home. And in that golden hour, Alexander understood one simple truth. Some women aren't meant to disappear. They exist to teach us how to love again, one day, one breath at a time. Morning sunlight filled New York with a soft golden glow. The light filtered through the sheer curtains, falling across the marble counter where 2 cups of coffee still steamed. The scent of freshly brewed espresso drifted through the kitchen, rich, warm, and deep like a memory. Olivia tied a cream silk apron around her waist, holding a small silver spoon in one hand. Alexander stood beside her, sleeves rolled up, his white shirt slightly creased, looking both out of place and dangerously endearing. "You've run a billion-dollar company, and yet you don't know how to make coffee," she teased, tilting her head. "I can negotiate a $100 million merger," he said with a hint of wry amusement, "but this machine doesn't seem interested in deals." She laughed softly, the sound like a note of music floating through the warm morning air. "Then let me teach you, but promise me one thing. No giving orders to the machine." "All right, I'll try, but if it breaks, I'm blaming the instructor." Their laughter mingled with the hiss of the espresso machine and the gentle clink of metal against ceramic, a symphony of ordinary sounds that somehow felt extraordinary, filling the space with a life it hadn't known for months. Olivia moved closer, her hand gently resting over his as he tilted the milk frother. "Easy," she murmured. "Coffee has to be treated like something alive. If you rush it, it turns bitter." Her voice was soft, her breath brushing his neck. Alexander froze for a second. Her scent, vanilla and jasmine mixed with something only she had, blended with the warmth of the coffee, and his pulse stumbled. He turned slightly, glancing back at her over his shoulder. The distance between them was barely a breath. "I thought coffee was just about ratios and temperature," he said quietly. "It isn't," she whispered with a faint smile. "It's about patience. Like love, you can know all the formulas, but without patience, you'll never taste the real thing." The words were light, but they struck a deep chord. He set the frother down and turned to face her. The morning light touched her face, her skin glowing, her green eyes glimmering with flecks of gold. "I'm still learning how to love," he said, his voice low, raw, and real. Olivia smiled gently. "Then it's a good thing I'm still here to teach you." The coffee was ready. They sat together at the small marble counter, steam curling lazily between them. Alexander took a sip and grimaced slightly. "Bitter," he muttered. "Because you poured too fast," she teased. "Next time, let me hold your hand a little longer." He laughed under his breath. "Sounds like the most valuable lesson I've ever had." She rested her chin on her hand, eyes bright. "Careful, Alexander. Coffee isn't the only thing I'm teaching you." The space between them stilled, not heavy, not awkward, just full. The smell of coffee mingled with sunlight and the warmth of breath, turning the simple morning into something sacred. Alexander looked at her, his expression softening in a way she had never seen before. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think love was control, keeping everything within reach, but love is letting go." Olivia tilted her head, her smile tender. "Letting go to touch, not holding on to prevent loss." He nodded slowly, and in that moment they understood each other perfectly without needing another word. She reached across the counter, brushing away a faint streak of foam from his lower lip. Her fingertip lingered on his skin, a brief electric touch. Alexander caught her hand. Not hard, just enough to keep it there. "Olivia," he whispered, as if her name itself was an exhale. She met his gaze. She didn't pull back. The next second, his lips found hers. The kiss wasn't rushed or fierce. It was quiet, slow, and filled with everything unspoken. Two people who had lost their way, finding each other again between the warmth of their breath and the scent of coffee. The bitterness melted into sweetness. When they finally broke apart, she smiled against his lips. "You're improving." In coffee or in love? Both. They sat together for a long time. The light of New York slowly spread across the room. On the counter, the coffee grew cold, but its fragrance lingered. Alexander reached for her hand again. "I think," he said softly. "Everything begins again, not with promises, but with a cup of coffee." "As long as you don't pour too fast," she teased, her tone playful and warm. He chuckled, the sound low and content. "I'll learn. One day, one drop at a time." Outside, the sounds of the city swelled, the symphony of New York waking up. Inside the penthouse, the air still carried the scent of coffee, a quiet reminder that sometimes love doesn't need grand gestures. It only needs to slow down, stay true to itself, and be patient enough to bloom into its own gentle fragrance. Morning broke over Manhattan in a gentle blaze of light. The penthouse was still, save for the faint hum of traffic far below. On the dining table, a black suitcase lay open, a few suits neatly folded beside it. Next to them, a single plane ticket rested. New York, Tokyo. Sharp printed letters slicing through the warmth that had only recently returned to the apartment. Olivia stood by the kitchen doorway, a half-finished cup of coffee in her hand. The steam rose between her and the suitcase, blurring her gaze. There was no accusation in her eyes, only understanding, laced with quiet fear. Alexander emerged from the bedroom, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his phone gripped tightly in his hand. "Marcus just called," he said, his voice low and rough. "The board needs me in Tokyo. The Asian partnerships are collapsing. If I don't show up, we could lose everything we've built." He set the phone down and stared at the ticket, then at her. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. "You can't not go, can you?" Olivia asked softly. "I wish I could," he said, eyes still fixed on the ticket. "But if I don't, hundreds of jobs could vanish, everything I've built." He stopped mid-sentence. "And everyone will think I've lost my edge." Olivia walked toward him, setting her cup down beside his phone. "They can think whatever they want, Alexander, but you're not weak because you love someone. You're only weak if you lose yourself again." Her words sank into him like the echo of truth he'd spent years avoiding. He thought of the nights buried in spreadsheets, of victories that left him empty, of success that never warmed him. And now, standing before the woman who could fill an entire room with peace just by being in it, he finally understood what he was truly afraid of losing. She helped him fasten the buttons of his shirt. The distance between them vanished. He could feel her breath against his collar, smell the vanilla in her hair. "I don't need you home every day," she said, her voice soft but certain. "I just need you to choose to come back." Alexander looked down at her. The morning light filtered through the curtains, caught in her green eyes, and for a moment the world shrank to a single promise. "I'll come back," he said, his voice husky, steady. "Always." She smiled faintly. She didn't ask for more. She knew this time he meant it. JFK Airport. Buzzed with noise and motion, the mechanical rhythm of departure. Alexander walked through it all, his footsteps echoing between announcements, white light, and polished floors. But in his mind, there was only her voice. "I just need you to choose to come back." From the plane window, he watched the city fade, the skyscrapers, the grid of streets, Central Park, a green rectangle against concrete, the skyline that now felt like home, not because of its majesty, but because of her. For the first time in years, he felt no thrill at the thought of business ahead, only a hollow ache of missing, and a fear that he might come back too late. Tokyo night. The Hayes Capital Asia headquarters glowed against the neon skyline, sharp and cold. Inside the glass boardroom, the clock struck 10 p.m. The air was thick with tension. Graphs of plunging numbers flashed red across the screen. Marcus's voice cut through the silence. "If we don't divest our stake, we'll lose liquidity within 2 quarters. Another director interjected, impatient. "We should sell immediately, protect the cash. Hayes can rebuild later." All eyes turned to Alexander. He sat motionless, fingers laced, gaze distant. Once he would have already made a decision. Once logic would have spoken louder than everything. But now all he saw behind those numbers was Olivia by the window in New York, her shoulders lit by sunset, her words echoing, "You only become weak when you lose yourself." "Mr. Hayes," someone pressed, "your decision, sell or hold." Alexander drew a slow breath. The room went silent. The ticking of the clock filled the air. He lifted his head, and when he spoke, his voice was calm, but resolute. "No." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean we're not selling." A wave of shock rippled through the room. Chairs scraped, voices rose. Alexander didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his tone firm, each word measured. "We've spent too long chasing numbers. This company wasn't built to be afraid of loss. I won't sell the soul of Hayes Capital just to keep a temporary throne." One of the board members snapped. "You're risking everything for sentiment." Alexander smiled faintly, a weary kind of smile. "Maybe, but for the first time, I know that sentiment is worth more than any number you could show me." He paused, his gaze softening, as if he were speaking not to them, but to someone half a world away. "I used to think holding an empire meant holding everything, but all I ever held were assets, cold, lifeless. Now I finally have something worth keeping." He inhaled deeply, his next words barely more than a whisper. Her. After the meeting, Alexander stepped onto the rooftop terrace. The Tokyo wind blew cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of rain and neon. Below, the city stretched out in glittering lines, distant, dazzling, indifferent. He pulled out his phone. A single message from Olivia waited. Waiting. He leaned back against the railing, eyes closed. In the reflection of the glass wall behind him, he no longer saw the impenetrable CEO, only a man stripped of armor, finally remembering how to be real. He typed his reply slowly, each word deliberate. "I'm on my way home." In New York, night had fallen. Rain drizzled softly against the windows. Olivia sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer through the mist. The phone buzzed on the table beside her. She picked it up, and when she saw the message, her lips curved into a small, quiet smile. "I'm on my way home." She set the phone against her heart, feeling the warmth rise within her. Outside, the streets of New York glowed under the rain, and inside her, something long dormant stirred again. Not relief, not victory, just faith. Quiet, steady, and real. 2 months passed. New York had slipped into early autumn. The trees in Central Park turned the color of rust and gold, and the sunlight, once harsh, had softened into something clear and gentle. Hayes Capital, once on the brink of upheaval, had stabilized. The Tokyo partnerships had been restructured, investors returned, and the press celebrated the principled return of Alexander Hayes. But to him, success was no longer the greatest victory. The true victory was waking up each morning to see Olivia sitting by the balcony, sipping her coffee, sunlight dancing through her hair. It was the quiet walks they shared across the Brooklyn Bridge at night, saying nothing, just holding hands. After years spent buried in spreadsheets, stock prices, and endless meetings, Alexander finally understood. Some things can't be signed with a pen. They can only be kept with the heart. That day, New York welcomed an intimate yet elegant event. Visible Presence, an art exhibition curated by Olivia Bennett. It was an artistic space about light and emotion where every wall, every mirror, and every installation was arranged so that visitors could see not just the artwork, but themselves. On the central wall, she had written, "Irrt." Sometimes the most beautiful thing isn't in the light itself, but in the moment we dare to let the light touch us. The air was filled with the scent of fresh paint and soft jazz, while a cello played in the background. Guests murmured in awe at each piece, sunlit rooms, reflective surfaces, installations that seemed to breathe modern, warm, and entirely Olivia. Yet amid the praise, the flashes of cameras, and the golden lights, she still felt a small emptiness, a space where a familiar gaze hadn't yet appeared. Then, as she was speaking with an art critic, the doors at the end of the gallery opened. Alexander Hayes walked in. No announcement, no spotlight, just the sound of his footsteps on the polished floor, and the entire room seemed to slow. He wore a simple white shirt and a dark blazer, tall, composed, his eyes calm, yet burning bright. But when he saw her, that gaze softened. Warm. Real. Olivia turned, their eyes met across the crowd, across the music, across 1,000 reflections of light. The world seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them. Alexander walked forward, slow and steady, as if every step was an unspoken promise. When he finally stopped before her, a faint, sincere smile crossed his lips. "You don't just exist," he said, voice low and rough, just loud enough for her to hear through the hum of the room. "You are the light." The words made Olivia's eyes shimmer. In the gallery created to honor light, he was the one who saw her most clearly. Her reply was soft but unwavering. Light only exists when someone is brave enough to open their eyes to it. He smiled, taking one step closer, closing the distance between them. There were no more cameras, no more expectations, no more curious eyes that could intrude on the moment. From his pocket, he drew out a small velvet box that caught the light, and there, in the exhibition called Visible, he knelt down. The entire gallery went silent. Only the cello played, a tender note like a breath. "The first time I married you," Alexander said, eyes never leaving hers. "It was because I was afraid of losing a deal. This time I want to marry you, because I want to live with you." Time stilled. Olivia brought her hand to her lips, tears shining in her eyes. There was no surprise, only a deep, quiet emotion, as if she'd been waiting for this moment all along, through her journey of rediscovering herself. She bent down, touching his cheek gently, her voice trembling, but soft. "I never really left, Alexander. I was only waiting for the day you'd truly see me." He rose to his feet. They embraced, surrounded by applause, beneath golden reflections dancing on the glass ceiling. As the whole room glowed like dawn, Olivia rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "This time, if you lose your way, I'll pull you back." "I believe you," he murmured, "because you are home." That night, New York shimmered as if the city itself was celebrating. People spoke of the exhibition, of the woman who turned light into language, and of the man who had once stood atop the world, only to find peace standing beside her. After the celebration, they walked together across the Brooklyn Bridge. The golden lights rippled on the water below, and the night breeze carried the scent of rain and possibility. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Only hand in hand, in a promise unspoken. True love doesn't begin with perfection. It begins in the moment two people choose each other, again and forever. 6 months later, New York was in autumn. Its sky glazed in shades of amber and crimson. Sunlight fell upon the brownstones and balconies, overflowing with chrysanthemums. From the penthouse above the city, everything seemed to slow down, as if the whole world had paused to listen to the laughter echoing from the small kitchen. "Alexander." Olivia's voice rang out, a mix of amusement and mock scolding. "What did you just do?" Alexander turned around, holding in his hand a half-burnt slice of toast, light smoke curling through the kitchen. He shrugged, trying to hide his embarrassment. "I only looked away for 30 seconds. "Your 30 seconds are enough to turn breakfast into modern art." She laughed, stepping closer, gently taking the tongs from his hand. The smell of burnt bread mixed with hot coffee created a strange blend, familiar, warm, and unmistakably their own. Standing behind him, Olivia wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head on his back. "Thank goodness you're a terrible cook. That way, I still have a reason to stay." Alexander chuckled, placing his hand over hers. The warmth of her touch seeped through the thin cotton of his shirt, sinking into his skin, making the rest of the world fade away. He tilted his head, pressing a slow, grateful kiss to the back of her hand. "And I," he murmured, his voice low and soft as the breath of late afternoon. "Remember why I came home every time I see you smile." She squeezed his hand gently, her lips curving faintly. "Then keep burning the toast, will you? I like seeing you flustered." "You like seeing me fail?" "No, I like seeing you real." Alexander turned around. Their eyes met through a thin veil of smoke. The last light of day streamed through the window, painting her face in a golden hue, as if she were glowing from within. He leaned in, their lips touching lightly, like a quiet confession. No more drama, no more struggle. Just two people, peaceful enough to love, wise enough to know that love doesn't need to be perfect, only chosen every single day. Evening slowly descended. The kitchen was calm. The smell of burnt toast had faded, replaced by the soft sweetness of cinnamon from the muffins Olivia had just baked. They carried 2 glasses of red wine onto the balcony, where the sunset poured molten gold over Manhattan. From up there, the city looked like a masterpiece, skyscrapers glowing, tiny lights beginning to twinkle, the distant sound of jazz floating up from a street below. Olivia sat on a wrought iron chair, pulling her legs up, holding her glass. Alexander sat beside her, draping a light blanket over her shoulders. Neither of them spoke. Only the dimming sunlight brushed their skin, and their steady breaths fell into the same rhythm. "You know," he said softly, his voice floating in the golden air, "not everyone gets the chance to love the one they once lost." She turned to him, her gaze soft as autumn water. "I'm lucky," he looked at her, then continued. "Because you gave me that chance." Olivia smiled gently. "I didn't give it. You found it yourself. I just stood still long enough for you to see me." Alexander was silent for a moment, then lifted his glass. "Then to you, the one who reminded me how to see, how to feel, and how to love." She raised hers too. "And to you, the man who finally learned that love isn't about possessing, but about coexisting." Their glasses clinked softly. The sound rang, delicate and clear, like the final note of a symphony. The sun sank behind the skyline. The light shimmered on their wine glasses and across their skin, crimson warmth melting into breath, tender and unspoken, like a promise. Olivia rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath his shirt. "Do you know what I love most about New York?" she asked. "Tell me." "The evenings, because every day the sun falls as if for the first time, just like the way you look at me." Alexander smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I look at you as if I'm afraid of losing you again." "But this time," she whispered, eyes half closed, "you won't." He bent down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "No, because this time, I've learned how to stay." The twilight deepened, the crimson fading into violet. The city began to glow. Beneath their balcony, New York sparkled like a constellation, and on that small terrace, 2 people sat side by side, wrapped in the sweet silence of those who had weathered the storm and chosen to remain. Inside, the burnt toast still sat in the tray, a clumsy relic, a reminder that happiness doesn't need perfection. It only needs laughter, a hand to hold, and a sunset to share. Olivia turned to him, her face bathed in the last trace of light. "You know, New York has never looked this beautiful." "It's not the city, Liv," he replied, voice husky, eyes glimmering with the sunset's fire. "It's because for the first time, I'm seeing it through your eyes." She laughed softly, tapping her glass against his one more time. Then they kissed, amidst the twilight, the distant sound of sirens and laughter, and the scent of autumn drifting through the breeze. A kiss neither rushed nor planned, only the pure joy of being alive, being loved, and being present. New York slowly sank into the night, On the high balcony, two souls who had once lost each other now sat close, shoulder to shoulder, their glasses touching one last time in the fading light. Because sometimes love doesn't need to be reborn in fire, only in the quiet glow of those who dare to stay. And they stayed, amidst the sunset, amidst the city of dreams, amidst themselves. Thank you for being part of Heartwarming Millionaire. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Heartwarming Millionaire family.